contrast, we said economic growth means an increase in a country's output. And when we talk about output, we're talking about the measurement of your country's GDP. There's the production possibility curve, PPC. The measurement of this is GDP. So if a country is developing, if a country is growing, it has to reflect on its production possibility curve and its economic growth. So if our economy is growing, it simply means that the output in that country is increasing. And not just the output, it has to reflect in our life. So that is why we have to measure the GDP per capita. GDP measures what we produce. But that does not mean that we are growing in terms of human life. So how do we know if, as the country is growing, we are also growing? We get to know through an increase in our GDP per capita. So there's GDP, which is the total number, the measurement of your output. And there's GDP per capita, which measures your head up place. Head up place. And there's GDP per capita, which is GDP divided by the total population. So if the GDP per capita of last year is lesser than the GDP per capita this year, it means the economy is growing. So if your GDP per capita increases from the previous year, it means the economy is growing. If the GDP of a country increases compared to the last year, it means the economy is growing. So economic growth is about how much more our GDP has increased over time. How much more our GDP per capita has increased over time. Does it make sense, please? Does it make sense or not, please?
Yes.
I'm going to explain again. A country, please. Your right hand, please. Your right hand.
Huh?
Right hand. Your right hand, please. And that is what I want. Yes, what is your question? That is not a question. You stay. No, you can't, sorry. You can't. You just came in some 5 minutes ago. So what we're saying is this. There's GDP, which is talking about the output of a country. Sit down properly. Put your leg down. It's a class. Put your leg down, please. Put your leg down. There's GDP, which is about a country's output. So if a country is, the point is about growth and development. There's economic growth if our GDP increases over time. So for the last year, let's assume our GDP for last year is 500. And this year our GDP is 550. There's an increase of $50, or 50 anyway. So that means there's economic growth. So how do we know it reflects in the life of people? We get to know if the increase in GDP has reflected in the life of people through GDP per capita. If you want to know if the economy is growing, you measure it through the GDP, which is the measurement of your country's output. But does it reflect in our life? How do we know if it reflects in our life or not? We get to know through GDP per capita, which is GDP divided by the total population. So this gives us the value of individual income over time. Does it make sense now, please? Great. So economic development, it implies to an increase in the country's GNP. What's the difference between GNP and GDP? There's GNP because we have added GDP to the income from abroad. When we talk about income from abroad, we're simply talking about the Libyans working abroad, the Libyans having investment abroad. Whatever they make abroad has to come back to the country. So it has to be added to what is being produced locally. Do you understand what GNP is here? There's GDP, what is being produced here in Libya, and there's GNP, which simply means Libyans who are abroad, who have investments in abroad, who have houses in abroad, who works in abroad, they're going to come home, they're going to transfer their money here, yes or no? So it has to be added up to the country's output. And when it is added up to the country's output, we call it GNP. Do you understand the difference between GNP and GDP now, please?
Yes.
Do we understand the difference between GNP and GDP? GDP is your output. GNP has been included with the income from the Libyans from abroad. Any question about that? Any question up to now? Good. So what constitutes to fundamental change in the structure of a society? When we talk about structure, we're talking about the faces of the society, the faces. What brings about this change in life? What brings about this change in economy? The first thing we think about is urbanization. When we talk about urbanization, it simply means the movement of people from a rural area to an urban area. So this is Tripoli. Tripoli is seen as like the capital city. There's Salman, with respect to Salman. There's Tarhuna, with respect to Tarhuna. These areas, people move from there down to Tripoli because they feel the lifestyle in Tripoli is way better off. Respect to those places I mentioned, but I'm just using it as an example. I think you're getting my point here. So the movement between those rural area to urban area might change the structure of the economy. You don't do that in my classroom. Is it clear, please? Yes. The second one is education. Why do we literally talk about the primary education? With primary education, it simply means that you can read as well as write. So the only thing you need is what? A primary education. With primary education, you would know what is left and what is right. Do you understand the second point I'm making here? So the structure of a country would change if the numbers of literates in that country increases. And for you to be literate, at least you have to know how to write your name. And with a primary school education, you should be able to do that. Yes or no? Do we get it, please? The third one, political stability. When we talk about politics is the process through which we get what, when, and how. This is what politics is. And when we talk about what, when, and how, we're simply talking about allocation of resources. The time of allocation of resources, the type of allocation of resources, the process of allocation of resources. This is what politics is. So the structure of a country will change. Put your hand up, please. The structure of a country will change if the country is politically stable. And what makes a country to be politically stable? A country will be politically stable if every individuals that are in office are accountable for whatever they do. And for individuals to be accountable, or for politicians to be accountable, we have to think about democracy. And why is it democracy? Because democracy is the government of the people, for the people, and by the people. So whatever we do, we are accountable. We are accountable for them. So a political stable country would mean that the economic development would increase. So if the country is stable, things will be better. But if the country is not stable, it affects the face or the structure of the economy. Do you understand this point, please? Do you understand or not, please? The last one, move away from subsistence industry to provision of services. What is subsistence? Subsistence simply means I can only feed myself. So whatever I do is just for me and my family. That is subsistence. But we should start thinking further than that. We don't just produce because we want to consume. We should start thinking about producing because we can supply others. That is moving from subsistence to more, to more elaborate situation, to services. So you don't just produce because you want to feed yourself or your family. You start producing because you can as well sell after feeding yourself. So that changes the structure of the society. Do we get it, please? Yes. Any question about that? Any question about that? So that's about economic growth, economic development, and what constitutes or what changes or what factors bring about changes in the structure of an economy. So the next one we need to talk about is factors of production.